In the vast expanse of science fiction, space battles represent the ultimate theater of war, where the stakes are measured not in cities or countries, but in entire worlds, civilizations, and the very survival of species. But what transforms a mere space conflict into an impossible battle? These are engagements where victory seems not just unlikely, but fundamentally inconceivable based on conventional military wisdom. An impossible space battle transcends traditional metrics of warfare. It's not simply about being outnumbered or outgunned, though these factors certainly play their part. Rather, impossibility manifests through a confluence of overwhelming disadvantages, technological superiority so vast it seems insurmountable, environmental hazards that threaten to destroy both sides equally, strategic positions so hopeless that retreat would be the only logical option, or enemy forces so alien and powerful that conventional tactics become meaningless. These battles challenge the very nature of what's possible in warfare, demanding not just courage and firepower, but cunning that borders on genius, tactics so unconventional they redefine military thinking, and sometimes, that most unreliable of military assets, pure luck. They represent moments where the laws of physics, probability, and military doctrine converge to create scenarios where victory requires nothing short of the impossible. The importance of these conflicts extends far beyond their immediate outcomes. Each battle has fundamentally shaped how we conceptualize space warfare in fiction, establishing archetypes and expectations that continue to influence storytelling today. They remind us that in the infinite darkness of space, where the battlefield itself can be as deadly as any enemy, the greatest victories often come not from superior technology or numbers, but from the indomitable spirit of those willing to fight against impossible odds. Battle 10, the Battle of Endor, Star Wars, Return of the Jedi. The forest moon of Endor became the stage for one of the most audacious military gambles in galactic history. The Rebel Alliance, having learned of the Empire's second Death Star, a weapon even more powerful than its predecessor, faced a strategic nightmare that would have driven any conventional military force to despair. The Death Star 2 wasn't merely operational, it was protected by a deflector shield generator on Endor's surface and defended by the largest Imperial fleet ever assembled. Why this battle was impossible? The mathematics of the conflict were staggering. The rebel fleet, comprising a handful of Mon Calamari cruisers, aging Corellian corvettes, and squadrons of fighters, faced the Imperial Navy's most elite vessels, including superstar destroyers that dwarfed entire rebel capital ships. But numbers told only part of the story. The Death Star's superlaser could obliterate capital ships with single shots, a capability it demonstrated with horrifying efficiency by vaporizing the Mon Calamari cruiser Liberty early in the engagement. The tactical situation bordered on the absurd. The rebels had to coordinate a three-pronged assault, a ground team to destroy the shield generator, a space battle to engage the Imperial fleet, and a desperate run through the Death Star's superstructure to destroy its reactor core. Each element depended entirely on the other's success, creating a chain of dependencies where failure at any point would doom the entire operation. The tactics of desperation. Admiral Akbar's fleet employed what military historians would later term controlled chaos, using the rebels' superior maneuverability to engage Imperial ships at point-blank range, where the Empire's advantage in long-range firepower became liability. X-wing and A-wing fighters wove between capital ships in patterns that would have been suicide against any other enemy, but the Imperial doctrine of overwhelming firepower had not anticipated such unorthodox tactics. Meanwhile, Han Solo's ground team relied entirely on the most unlikely of allies, the primitive Ewoks, whose Stone Age weapons and knowledge of their forest home proved devastatingly effective against the Empire's technological superiority. The juxtaposition was almost comical. Imperial walkers, designed to crush organized resistance, falling victim to rolling logs and rope traps that would have been obsolete 1,000 years earlier on any civilized world. The impossible victory. The battle's turning point came when the Death Star's shields fell, allowing Lando Calrissian and Wedge Antilles to penetrate the battle station's core. Their journey through the Death Star's interior, navigating at impossible speeds through a structure never designed for such intrusion, culminated in the destruction of the main reactor. The resulting explosion didn't just destroy the Death Star, it sent shockwaves through hyperspace that were felt across the galaxy. What made this victory truly impossible wasn't just the tactical brilliance or unexpected heroics, but the convergence of factors that should never have aligned: the Emperor's overconfidence in allowing the rebels to discover the Death Star's location, the Ewoks' decision to aid the rebellion, Luke Skywalker's ability to redeem his father at the crucial moment, and the split-second timing required for the reactor core assault. It was a victory that required not just military skill, but the Force itself seeming to will the impossible into existence. Battle 9, The Fall of Reach, Halo series. Reach stood as humanity's crown jewel, second only to Earth itself in strategic importance. Its orbital shipyards had produced the vessels that kept humanity's scattered colonies connected, its military academies had trained the officers who led the United Nations Space Command, and its research facilities had developed the technologies that allowed humans to fight, however unsuccessfully, against the overwhelming might of the Covenant. When the alien alliance finally located Reach, both sides understood that this would be humanity's last stand before Earth itself came under threat. The mathematics of extinction: the Covenant force that emerged from slip space above Reach represented the largest alien armada ever assembled for a single engagement. Hundreds of warships, from nimble corvettes to massive supercarriers, filled the orbital space around the planet. Each Covenant vessel possessed energy shielding that could absorb tremendous punishment, plasma weaponry that could slice through human armor like tissue paper, and boarding craft filled with warriors who viewed death in battle as the highest honor. Against this overwhelming force, the UNSC could muster barely 50 vessels of varying classes, most damaged from previous engagements and none possessing the technological superiority that might level the playing field. The orbital defense platforms that protected Reach were formidable, but designed to defend against conventional human threats, not the exotic technologies of an alien alliance that had been perfecting warfare for millennia. Spartans against infinity: the true impossibility of Reach's defense lay not in space, but on the planet's surface, where Noble Team and other Spartan II units fought a battle they knew they could not win. These genetically enhanced super soldiers, each worth a battalion of regular troops, found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to possess infinite reserves. For every elite warrior killed, 2 more took its place. For every Covenant dropship destroyed, 10 more descended from orbit. The Spartans employed every tactic in their considerable arsenal: hit-and-run strikes against supply lines, assassination missions targeting Covenant field commanders, and desperate defensive actions at key installations. They turned Reach's cities into killing fields, its mountains into fortresses, and its very geography into a weapon. But the mathematics remained unchanged: they were buying time with their lives, nothing more. The Pillar of Autumn's escape: the battle's impossible nature crystallized in its final hours. As Covenant forces closed in on the orbital shipyards where the UNSC Pillar of Autumn underwent emergency modifications, Noble Team made their last stand. Jorge 052 sacrificed himself in a desperate gambit to destroy a Covenant supercarrier, only to watch in horror as the explosion served as a beacon for an even larger fleet. Carter A259 gave his life to ensure Emil A239 and Noble 6 could reach the shipyard, while Emil died defending the mass driver that would launch Cortana to safety. The impossibility reached its peak as Noble 6, the last Spartan standing, held off waves of Covenant forces alone, buying precious minutes for the Pillar of Autumn to escape with humanity's greatest AI and the location of a mysterious ring world that might offer hope for survival. It was a victory measured not in territory held or enemies destroyed, but in the single ship that escaped to carry forward humanity's desperate gamble for survival. The fall of Reach was impossible not because it couldn't happen, but because the defenders succeeded beyond all rational expectation, transforming inevitable defeat into the foundation for humanity's ultimate victory against the Covenant. Battle 8, the Tycho Station Incident, the Expanse, in the unforgiving vacuum between Mars and Jupiter, where even the smallest miscalculation meant death. The battle for Tycho Station represented more than just a conflict over resources; it became a defining moment that would reshape the balance of power throughout the solar system. The station, perched in the belt like a crown jewel of engineering, controlled shipping lanes that were the arteries of interplanetary commerce. When political tensions finally exploded into open warfare, the battle that followed defied every prediction and strategic analysis. The impossible equation: Tycho Station's defensive position seemed impregnable on paper. Its advanced manufacturing capabilities, sophisticated point defense systems, and strategic location in the asteroid belt created what military analysts considered an unassailable fortress. The station's Belter defenders, led by Fred Johnson, possessed intimate knowledge of their environment and the desperation that comes from fighting for their very existence as a people. Against them came a coalition fleet that should have overwhelmed any resistance, Martian Navy vessels with their cutting-edge Epstein drives and military-grade rail guns, supported by Earth's numerical superiority and advanced missile systems. The technological gap was staggering. Where Belters flew converted mining ships and haulers, their enemies brought purpose-built warships designed for exactly this kind of engagement. Tactics in the dark. The battle unfolded across 3 dimensions that stretched military doctrine to its breaking point. The Belters used their knowledge of asteroid trajectories to create moving shields, positioning massive rocks between their ships and enemy fire. They turned the belt itself into a weapon, using precisely calculated nudges to send asteroids tumbling toward enemy formations at velocities that made them more dangerous than any missile. Fred Johnson's tactical genius lay in understanding that conventional space combat doctrine was useless in the belt's chaotic environment. Instead of maintaining formation, Belter ships scattered like schools of fish, appearing from behind asteroids to deliver devastating railgun strikes before disappearing again into the rocky maze. They used the very hazards that made belt navigation treacherous, radiation, debris fields, and gravitational anomalies, as tactical advantages. The enemy fleet found their superior technology becoming a liability. Their advanced sensors, designed for open space combat, struggled to distinguish between ships and asteroids. Their long-range missiles, programmed for conventional interception courses, shattered against rocks or flew harmlessly into the void. Most critically, their fuel supplies, calculated for standard military operations, began running dangerously low as they maneuvered constantly to avoid both enemy fire and asteroid collisions. The protomolecule factor. The battle's impossibility reached its zenith when the protomolecule, an alien technology beyond human comprehension, entered the equation. Julie Mao's infected ship, thought destroyed, had somehow survived and evolved, becoming something that defied the laws of physics as humanity understood them. The alien technology began affecting both fleets in ways that made conventional tactics meaningless. Ships that should have been destroyed continued fighting, their hulls restructured by alien intelligence into configurations that shouldn't have been able to maintain structural integrity. Weapon systems enhanced by protomolecule infection delivered firepower that exceeded their design specifications by orders of magnitude. Most terrifyingly, the infection began spreading through communication channels, turning some vessels into unwilling allies of an alien intelligence with its own agenda. Victory through annihilation. The battle ended not with traditional victory, but with both sides fleeing in terror from what they had unleashed. The protomolecule's transformation of Tycho Station into something between a space station and a living organism created a threat that made their original conflict seem petty by comparison. The surviving ships from both fleets found themselves in an uneasy alliance, united by their shared horror at what humanity had discovered. This impossible battle reshaped the political landscape of the solar system, proving that in the age of the protomolecule, traditional concepts of military superiority had become obsolete. Victory belonged not to the strongest or most technologically advanced, but to those capable of adapting to threats that redefined the very nature of warfare. Battle 7, the Briar Patch Engagement, Star Trek, Insurrection, deep within the volatile region of space known as the Briar Patch, where the normal laws of physics bent and twisted like light through a prism, the USS Enterprise D faced an enemy that challenged not just their tactical doctrine, but their understanding of reality itself. The metaphasic radiation that permeated the region created an environment where sensors failed, weapon systems fluctuated wildly, and every decision carried consequences that rippled through spacetime in unpredictable ways. The gravitational gauntlet. The Briar Patch was dominated by a rogue planet whose gravity well had been artificially enhanced by Sun-A technology, creating gravitational shears that could tear apart a starship superstructure in seconds. The enemy fleet, led by Admiral Doherty's forces and their Sun-A allies, had positioned themselves in the gravity well's stable zones, forcing any attacking vessel to navigate through a maze of tidal forces that made conventional approach vectors impossible. Captain Picard faced a tactical nightmare that violated every principle of Federation naval doctrine. His ship's warp drive was useless, the metaphasic radiation interfered with subspace fields, trapping all combatants at impulse speeds. The Enterprise's phaser arrays, calibrated for normal space combat, suffered massive power fluctuations that made accurate targeting nearly impossible. Even their shields, the most basic defensive technology, flickered and pulsed as the exotic radiation played havoc with their emitter arrays. Improvised warfare. The impossibility of the battle forced both sides to abandon traditional tactics entirely. Picard ordered modifications to the Enterprise's deflector array, turning it into a massive sensor probe that could cut through the metaphasic interference. Chief LaForge and his engineering teams worked miracles, rerouting power through backup systems and creating entirely new weapon configurations that could function in the Briar Patch's chaotic environment. The enemy's advantages in numbers and firepower became meaningless when their weapons suffered the same degradation as the Enterprise's systems. Sun A battle cruisers, designed for overwhelming frontal assault, found their particle weapons dispersing harmlessly in the metaphasic storms. Their cloaking devices, a crucial tactical advantage, became unreliable as the radiation interfered with their light-bending properties. The impossible maneuver. The battle's turning point came when Data, calculating trajectories in real time, identified a path through the gravity well that would allow the Enterprise to use the rogue planet's enhanced gravitational field as a weapon. The maneuver required precision beyond human capability. A slight miscalculation would result in the ship being crushed by tidal forces or flung into the metaphasic storm that raged around the planet's equator. As the Enterprise dove into the gravity well, its hull groaning under stresses that exceeded design specifications, the ship became something unprecedented, a manned projectile using gravitational acceleration to achieve velocities that would have been impossible with conventional propulsion. The enemy fleet, positioned to defend against traditional attack patterns, found themselves facing a starship that approached from directly below the orbital plane at a significant fraction of light speed. Victory through physics. The Enterprise's impossible trajectory allowed them to strike at the Sun A harvesting operation directly, using the planet's own gravitational field to enhance their weapons' effectiveness. The metaphasic radiation, which had been an obstacle throughout the battle, became an asset as the ship's modified deflector array channeled it into a focused beam that disrupted the Sun A technology at the quantum level. The battle ended with the enemy fleet in full retreat, their harvesting operation destroyed and their alliance with Starfleet Command exposed. But the true impossibility lay not in the tactical victory, but in the fact that the Enterprise crew had learned to fight a battle where the battlefield itself was the most dangerous enemy, where victory required not just courage and skill, but a fundamental understanding of exotic physics that pushed the boundaries of 24th century science. Battle 6, The Last Stand at the Ionian Nebula, Battlestar Galactica, in the depths of space, where the Ionian Nebula's electromagnetic storms could blind sensors and disrupt communications across light years, the remnants of humanity's colonial fleet faced their most impossible battle yet. The Cylons, having pursued the ragtag flotilla across the galaxy, had finally cornered their prey in a region of space that was as deadly to both fleets as any weapon ever devised. What followed was not merely a battle for survival, but a testament to the human spirit's refusal to accept extinction. The killing field. The Ionian Nebula was a graveyard of stars, where stellar material from ancient supernovas created an environment hostile to all known forms of technology. The nebula's interior churned with radiation levels that would kill an unprotected human in minutes, electromagnetic pulses that could disable ship systems without warning, and gravitational anomalies that turned navigation into a deadly game of chance. Commander Adama's fleet consisted of fewer than 40 ships, most of them civilian vessels never designed for combat. The military escort, led by the aging Battlestar Galactica and her sister ship Pegasus, represented the last functional warships in human space. Against them came a Cylon armada that numbered in the hundreds, base stars with their swarms of raiders, resurrection ships carrying the digital souls of their race, and heavy cruisers designed specifically to eliminate colonial military assets. Tactics born of desperation. The colonial fleet's survival depended on turning the nebula's hazards into weapons. Admiral Adama ordered his ships to dive deeper into the stellar maelstrom, using the radiation and electromagnetic interference to mask their signatures from Cylon sensors. The civilian ships, guided by Galactica's experienced navigators, threaded their way through asteroid fields and plasma storms that would have destroyed them under normal circumstances. The Vipers and Raptors, colonial fighters designed for carrier operations, found themselves flying in conditions that challenged every aspect of their design. Pilots navigated by dead reckoning when their instruments failed, used debris clouds for cover, and engaged enemy raiders in knife fights among the nebula's twisted metal formations. Many fighter pilots didn't return, some to enemy fire, others simply lost in the nebula's chaotic embrace. The resurrection ship Gambit. The battle's most impossible moment came when Admiral Kane of the Pegasus identified the Cylon resurrection ships hidden deep within the nebula's core. These vessels, carrying the downloaded consciousness of every Cylon who had died in the long pursuit, represented the enemy's immortality made manifest. Destroying them would make Cylon deaths permanent, a psychological advantage that might offset humanity's numerical inferiority. The assault required both colonial battlestars to penetrate the nebula's most dangerous region, where plasma storms regularly reached temperatures exceeding those found in stellar coronas. The Pegasus led the attack, her hull scarred by countless previous battles, while Galactica provided covering fire against Cylon forces that materialized from the electromagnetic chaos like ghosts made metal. The price of victory. The Pegasus reached the resurrection ships, her guns blazing in defiance of the radiation that was slowly cooking her crew. Admiral Kane's final transmission, barely audible through the static, confirmed the destruction of both resurrection vessels before her ship succumbed to the nebula's killing embrace. The Pegasus died as she had lived, fighting against impossible odds with a crew that refused to surrender. The surviving Cylon forces, suddenly faced with their own mortality, began a fighting withdrawal from the nebula. For the first time since the fall of the colonies, the mechanical race that had seemed unstoppable showed something approaching fear. The colonial fleet, battered but intact, had achieved the impossible. They had reminded their enemies what it meant to die. The Battle of the Ionian Nebula proved that impossibility was not merely about numbers or technology, but about the willingness to sacrifice everything for a chance at survival. In a nebula that should have been the tomb of humanity's last survivors, they had instead written their most defiant chapter yet. Battle 5, The Defense of the Citadel, Mass Effect 3, at the heart of Citadel space, where the ancient space station served as the seat of galactic government and the symbol of organic civilization's unity, the final confrontation between the Reapers and the combined fleets of every spacefaring species reached its crescendo. The Citadel itself had been revealed as the key to the Crucible, a weapon of unimaginable power built from the scattered knowledge of countless extinct civilizations. The battle that followed would determine not just the fate of the current cycle, but whether organic life would have any future at all. The mathematics of extinction. The Reaper Armada that emerged from dark space represented the accumulated military might of millions of years of galactic harvests. Each Reaper Sovereign-class vessel was 2 kilometers of living metal, armed with weapons that could reduce dreadnoughts to their component atoms and protected by barriers that had never been breached by conventional firepower. The lesser Reaper forces, destroyers, oculi, and processors, numbered in the thousands, each one a nightmare fusion of organic and synthetic technologies. Against this force of primordial terror came the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Turian dreadnoughts with their devastating the Nyx cannons flew alongside human alliance vessels equipped with experimental the Nyx weaponry. Aseri carriers launched fighters crewed by commandos who had trained their entire lives for this moment, while Solarian frigates provided electronic warfare support with technologies that pushed the boundaries of known science. Even the traditionally isolationist Quarians had committed their entire migrant fleet to the battle. The Citadel trapped. The true impossibility of the battle lay in the Reapers' tactical masterstroke. They had seized the Citadel itself and relocated it to Earth orbit, turning humanity's homeworld into both the ultimate prize and the ultimate hostage. The ancient space station's massive arms had closed, sealing the interior and making any assault a nightmare of close-quarters combat in a structure that was larger than most planets. Commander Shepard's ground team faced an environment that defied conventional military doctrine. The Citadel's interior was a maze of districts and levels, each one defended by indoctrinated forces who fought with the desperate fury of those who believed they were defending paradise itself. Reaper forces had converted the station's own systems into weapons, atmosphere processors became poison gas dispensers, transportation systems became death traps, and the very architecture of the Citadel became hostile to organic life. Alliance of the Impossible. The space battle reached its impossible crescendo when ancient enemies fought side by side in defiance of millennia of hatred and mistrust. Krogan warriors, their blood rage barely contained, coordinated with Turian officers whose species had once tried to genocide them. Geth platforms, artificial intelligences that had been created and then abandoned, fought to protect the organic creators who had once sought their destruction. Admiral Hackett's coordination of this unprecedented alliance required diplomatic miracles to occur in real time. Communications protocols had to be established between species whose languages were incompatible, tactical doctrines had to be merged between militaries that had been designed to fight each other, and supply lines had to be maintained across vast distances while under constant assault by an enemy that seemed to anticipate every move. The Crucible activation. The battle's climax came when the Crucible, a weapon built from the combined knowledge of civilizations that had fought and died against the Reapers across countless cycles, finally docked with the Citadel. The activation sequence required not just technological precision, but choices that would reshape the fundamental nature of life in the galaxy. Shepard's final confrontation with the catalyst forced decisions about synthesis, control, or destruction that would echo across the cosmos. The impossible victory that followed came at a cost measured in entire fleets and civilizations. The pulse that spread from the Citadel across the galaxy's mass relay network didn't just defeat the Reapers, it transformed the very nature of synthetic and organic life. Some worlds fell silent as their technology failed, others blazed with new forms of existence that had never been seen before. The defense of the Citadel proved that impossibility could be overcome not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance alone, but through the unprecedented cooperation of species that had learned to see past their ancient hatreds. In the face of extinction, the galaxy had achieved something that the Reapers, for all their power and wisdom, had never understood: true unity. Battle 4, the fall of the Prothean Empire. Mass Effect, 50,000 years before the present galactic cycle, when the Prothean Empire stood as the dominant civilization in the galaxy, their final battle against the Reapers represented not just the end of their species, but the template for an impossible war that had been fought countless times across the eons. The Protheans, with their advanced technology and vast interstellar empire, had seemed invincible, until the Reapers emerged from dark space to demonstrate that no civilization, however advanced, could escape the pattern of harvest that had shaped galactic evolution for millions of years. The Prothean war machine. At the height of their power, the Protheans commanded technology that made the current cycle's achievements seem primitive by comparison. Their capital ships, kilometers in length, possessed weapon systems that could crack planets and barrier technology that seemed impenetrable to conventional attack. The Prothean military doctrine emphasized overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. Entire star systems could be conquered or defended with fleets that moved faster than light and struck with the fury of artificial stars. The Empire's greatest strength lay not in individual vessels, but in their understanding of mass relay technology that far exceeded anything achieved by subsequent civilizations. Prothean fleets could coordinate across galactic distances in real time, appearing anywhere in the galaxy within hours of receiving orders. Their intelligence networks spanned thousands of worlds, their manufacturing capabilities could produce fleets of dreadnoughts in months rather than years, and their scientific establishment had unlocked secrets of physics that would not be rediscovered for millennia. The impossible enemy, the Reapers that emerged from dark space to face the Prothean Empire, were even more terrifying than those that would later threaten Shepard's cycle. Sovereign-class vessels, each one a distillation of an entire harvested civilization's knowledge and capabilities, numbered in the thousands rather than hundreds. Their lesser forms, destroyers and processors, swarmed through Prothean space like a mechanical plague, each one equipped with indoctrination technology that could turn entire populations into willing servants of their own destruction. The true impossibility of fighting the Reapers lay not in their numbers or their technology, but in their nature. They were not conquerors seeking territory or resources, they were gardeners, harvesting civilizations when they reached a predetermined level of development. Every Prothean advance in technology or tactics had been anticipated and countered by beings that had fought this same war against countless previous civilizations. The indoctrination war. As the conflict progressed, the Protheans discovered that their greatest enemy was not the Reaper fleets themselves, but the insidious process of indoctrination that turned their own people into weapons against their species. Prothean scientists, studying captured Reaper technology in hopes of finding weaknesses, became unwitting agents of their enemies. Military commanders, exposed to Reaper artifacts during salvage operations, began making decisions that served Reaper interests rather than their own people's survival. The war became a nightmare of paranoia and betrayal as the Empire's command structure disintegrated under the weight of indoctrination. Trusted advisors revealed themselves as Reaper agents, vital intelligence was leaked to the enemy through channels that had been compromised for decades, and entire fleets turned their weapons on their former allies. The Protheans found themselves fighting not just the Reapers, but the corrupted versions of themselves. The beacon network in their final years, as the Empire crumbled and their worlds fell one by one to Reaper harvesting operations, the remaining Prothean scientists embarked on a project of impossible ambition. Rather than continuing to fight a war they knew they could not win, they began constructing a network of beacon caches across the galaxy, technological time capsules that would preserve their knowledge for the civilizations that would follow. Javik, one of the last Prothean soldiers to survive in stasis, would later describe the final construction of the beacon network as the most impossible mission ever conceived. Prothean teams, working in cells to avoid detection by indoctrinated forces, infiltrated worlds already under Reaper control to hide beacon caches in locations that would not be discovered for 50 millennia. Many of these teams consisted of soldiers who knew they would never see the stasis pods that might preserve their species. They were volunteering for missions that were certain death in hopes that their sacrifice might give future cycles a fighting chance. The long defeat. The fall of the Prothean Empire was impossible not because it couldn't happen, but because it happened despite every advantage the Protheans possessed. Their superior technology was turned against them through indoctrination. Their vast empire became a liability as Reaper forces used the mass relay network to strike anywhere at will, and their scientific curiosity, the very trait that had made them a galactic civilization, became the means of their own corruption. The final Prothean worlds fell not to glorious last stands, but to slow strangulation as populations were harvested and processed into new Reaper forms. The empire that had seemed eternal disappeared so completely that the next cycle would mistake their ruins for natural formations. Yet in their defeat, the Protheans achieved something impossible: they broke the pattern. Their beacon network would eventually provide the knowledge that allowed the current cycle to build the Crucible and end the Reaper threat forever. The fall of the Prothean Empire demonstrated that sometimes, the most impossible victory comes not from winning the battle, but from ensuring that the war itself can eventually be won by others. Battle 3, The Liberation of Ryloth, Star Wars, The Clone Wars, in the Outer Rim territories, where Republic influence was weakest and Separatist control most absolute, the Twi'lek homeworld of Ryloth had become a symbol of everything wrong with the galactic conflict. The planet's strategic hyperlane positions made it crucial to both sides, but for the Republic, it represented something more: a chance to prove that their clone armies fought not just for Senate politics, but for the freedom of oppressed peoples throughout the galaxy. What they found there would test every assumption about modern warfare. The orbital fortress above Ryloth, the Separatist fleet had established what military analysts would later term an impossible defensive position. The orbital blockade consisted of multiple Lucrehulk-class battleships, their hollow cores converted into massive starfighter hangars that could launch endless waves of droid fighters. These vessels, supported by Providence-class carriers and Munificent-class frigates, had turned Ryloth's orbital space into a killing field where no Republic vessel could survive for more than minutes. The blockade's true genius lay not in its individual components, but in its integration with the planet's surface defenses. Separatist commanders had installed massive ion cannons in Ryloth's mountain ranges, weapons powerful enough to disable Republic capital ships attempting orbital bombardment. Any vessel that survived the droid fighter swarms would face ground-based weaponry that could cripple a star destroyer with a single shot. The three-pronged assault. Admiral Wolf Yulleran's battle plan violated every principle of conventional Republic naval doctrine. Rather than concentrating his forces for a single overwhelming strike, he divided his already outnumbered fleet into 3 separate task forces, each one tasked with an objective that seemed impossible in isolation. Anakin Skywalker led the first assault wave, flying directly into the heart of the Separatist formation with only a handful of Torrent-class starfighters for support. His mission, to clear a corridor through the droid fighter screens, required flying patterns that pushed both pilot and machine beyond their design limitations. The young Jedi Knight's unorthodox tactics, combining force-enhanced reflexes with calculated recklessness, created gaps in the defensive formation that shouldn't have existed. Simultaneously, Obi-Wan Kenobi's ground forces began their assault on the planet's surface, targeting the ion cannon installations that made orbital bombardment impossible. The Twi'lek resistance, led by the freedom fighter Cham Syndulla, provided local knowledge and guerrilla tactics that turned Ryloth's own geography into a weapon against its occupiers. But the resistance fighters were armed with obsolete weapons and faced droid armies equipped with the latest Separatist military technology. The Defender's Gambit Captain Mar Tuk, the Neimoidian commander of the blockade, recognized the Republic strategy and prepared what he considered an unbeatable countermove. By allowing one Republic task force to penetrate the outer defensive perimeter, he could trap them between the main battle line and reserve formations, destroying the Republic fleet piecemeal while maintaining his orbital supremacy. The plan would have worked against any conventional opponent, but Tuk had underestimated both the desperation that drove the Republic forces and the tactical innovations that desperation would inspire. Ahsoka Tano's fighter squadron, trapped behind enemy lines and facing certain destruction, began using damaged Separatist vessels as improvised shields, piloting their fighters through the internal corridors of disabled battleships to attack from within. The impossible coordination. The battle's turning point came when all three Republic operations achieved their objectives simultaneously, an outcome that required precise timing across multiple battlefronts. As the surface ion cannons fell silent under the combined assault of clone troopers and Twi'lek resistance fighters, Skywalker's fighters broke through the droid fighter screens, opening a corridor for Yularen's heavy cruisers to engage the Separatist capital ships directly. The coordination required was beyond normal military capabilities. Clone commanders on the surface had to time their assaults to coincide with space-based attacks they couldn't see, while fighter pilots navigated through battle zones where friendly fire was as dangerous as enemy weapons. The margin for error was measured in seconds, too early, and the ion cannons would destroy the attacking cruisers, too late, and the droid fighters would overwhelm Skywalker's squadrons. Victory through sacrifice. The liberation of Ryloth ended with the Separatist blockade in full retreat, their impregnable defensive position shattered by tactics that defied conventional wisdom. The Republic had proven that superior numbers and positioning could be overcome through coordination, local support, and the kind of desperate courage that transformed individual pilots and soldiers into something greater than the sum of their parts. But the true impossibility of the victory lay in its aftermath. The Republic had not merely conquered Ryloth, they had liberated it, demonstrating to the galaxy that the Clone Wars could be about more than politics and territory. For the Twi'lek people, who had suffered under both Separatist occupation and Republic taxation, the battle proved that freedom was still possible, even in the darkest hours of galactic conflict. The liberation of Ryloth established the template for impossible victories throughout the Clone Wars, outnumbered forces achieving strategic objectives through coordination, local support, and tactical innovations that pushed the boundaries of what military doctrine considered possible. Battle 2, the War of 1996, Independence Day. On July 4, 1996, humanity faced its ultimate impossible battle when massive alien motherships appeared over every major city on Earth, their intent unmistakably hostile and their technology so far beyond human capabilities that conventional military doctrine became instantly obsolete. The battle that followed would test not just humanity's weapons and tactics, but their ability to unite in the face of extinction and find victory through ingenuity when superior firepower was not an option. The arrival of the alien vessels that cast their shadows across Earth's major population centers were engineering marvels that defied human understanding of physics and materials science. Each city destroyer, 15 miles in diameter, possessed energy weapons that could level Manhattan in a single discharge, while their hulls seemed impervious to every weapon in humanity's arsenal. Early military strikes, including nuclear weapons, had no measurable effect on the alien ship's defensive capabilities. President Thomas Whitmore watched from the White House Situation Room as humanity's most advanced fighter jets were swatted aside like insects by the alien smaller craft. The enemy's technology operated on principles that human science couldn't explain: anti-gravity that made their ships impossibly maneuverable, energy weapons that drew power from unknown sources, and defensive screens that seemed to violate the laws of thermodynamics. The hopeless defense as the first wave of alien attacks reduced major cities to rubble, military commanders around the world faced a tactical nightmare that had no precedent in human warfare. General William Gray coordinated a global defense against an enemy whose capabilities were so far beyond Earth's technology that every strategy seemed futile before it could be implemented. The aliens' attack pattern revealed a level of strategic thinking that suggested they had fought, and won, this same battle against countless other worlds. Their city destroyers targeted population centers and military installations with surgical precision, while their fighter craft eliminated any organized resistance before it could mount an effective counterattack. The invasion proceeded with the mechanical efficiency of a harvest operation, which, unknown to humanity, was exactly what it was. The virus gambit. The battle's impossible turning point came when David Levinson, a satellite technician turned unlikely hero, discovered that the aliens' seemingly invulnerable technology contained a fatal flaw. Their ships were networked together through a communication system that, while incredibly advanced, operated on principles similar enough to human computing that a virus, designed to exploit specific vulnerabilities in their operating architecture, could potentially disable their defenses. The plan that emerged was so audacious that it bordered on fantasy. Captain Stephen Hiller and Levinson would infiltrate the aliens' primary mothership using a captured enemy fighter, upload the virus directly to their central command system, and disable the protective screens of every ship in the alien fleet simultaneously. The margin for error was zero. Detection would mean certain death, while failure would doom humanity to extinction. The mothership assault. While Hiller and Levinson attempted their desperate infiltration mission, President Whitmore himself took to the skies in an F-18 Hornet, leading what might be humanity's final assault against the alien city destroyers. The president's radio address to the surviving military forces worldwide had transformed a scattered defensive action into a coordinated global strike, but coordination alone could not overcome the technological gap between Earth's weapons and alien defenses. The assault began as every previous attack had, with human weapons proving completely ineffective against alien shields. Fighter jets exploded under alien fire without inflicting any damage on their targets, and it seemed that humanity's last stand would end in the same failure as their first attempts at resistance. The impossible nature of the battle was crystallized in those moments when Earth's defenders continued to attack despite knowing their weapons were useless. The shields fall at the moment when human resistance was on the verge of collapse. Levinson's virus achieved its impossible objective. Across the globe, alien city destroyers found their protective screens suddenly offline, their invulnerable hulls exposed to weapons that had seemed primitive moments before. The psychological impact on both sides was immediate. Aliens who had never faced effective resistance suddenly found themselves vulnerable, while humans who had known only defeat suddenly saw their enemy bleed. Captain Jimmy Wilder's kamikaze attack on the alien mothership's primary weapon demonstrated the transformation that had taken place. Where bullets and missiles had failed, a single human pilot willing to sacrifice his life succeeded in crippling the vessel that had seemed unstoppable. Across the Earth, similar scenes played out as humanity's defenders pressed their momentary advantage with desperate courage. Victory through unity. The War of 1996 ended with the alien invasion fleet in full retreat, their mothership destroyed and their ground forces abandoned to face a suddenly aroused and vengeful humanity. But the true impossibility of the victory lay not in the virus or the military tactics, but in humanity's ability to unite across national, racial, and political boundaries in the face of extinction. President Whitmore's leadership had transformed a panicked rout into organized resistance, while ordinary citizens like David Levinson and Captain Hiller had found themselves capable of heroism that changed the course of human history. The battle proved that impossibility could be overcome not through superior technology or numbers, but through the kind of desperate ingenuity and unified purpose that emerged when an entire species faced its darkest hour. The War of 1996 established the archetype for impossible victories in science fiction, outnumbered defenders overcoming technologically superior invaders through courage, sacrifice, and the discovery that even the most advanced enemy could possess vulnerabilities that human ingenuity could exploit. #Battle number 1, the Battle of Sector 001, Star Trek, First Contact. In the year 2373, when the Borg Collective launched their second attempt to assimilate Earth, Starfleet faced an enemy that represented the ultimate impossible battle, a foe that adapted to every weapon, learned from every tactic, and possessed technology that made resistance seem not just futile, but logically meaningless. The Battle of Sector 001 would prove that even against an enemy that had perfected the art of conquest across the galaxy, victory was possible when desperation met innovation in the crucible of Earth's final defense. The perfect enemy, the Borg cube that emerged from transwarp space, was more than just a vessel, it was a living embodiment of technological perfection dedicated to a single purpose, the assimilation of all life in the galaxy. 27 kilometers on each side, the cube contained millions of drones and technology that had been harvested from thousands of species across multiple galactic quadrants. Every previous encounter with Starfleet had been analyzed, catalogued, and used to perfect countermeasures that made the collective more dangerous with each passing day. Captain Jean-Luc Picard, aboard the USS Enterprise E, watched from the edge of the neutral zone as every principle of Federation military doctrine proved inadequate against an enemy that existed beyond conventional concepts of warfare. The Borg did not seek territory, resources, or political advantage, they sought the complete absorption of humanity's biological and technological distinctiveness into their collective consciousness. The Fleet Engagement Admiral Hayes had assembled the largest Starfleet armada since the Dominion War began, but numbers meant little against an enemy that adapted to new weapons in seconds rather than hours. The USS Defiant, under Captain Sisko's command, led the initial assault with quantum torpedoes and pulse phasers designed specifically to penetrate Borg shields. For moments, the weapons proved effective, until the cube's adaptive algorithms analyzed the attack patterns and rendered them harmless. One by one, Starfleet's most advanced vessels were systematically disabled or destroyed. The Borg cube moved through the Federation fleet like a force of nature, its cutting beams slicing through ablative armor and its tractor beams dragging entire ships into assimilation alcoves built into its hull. Each vessel that fell provided the collective with new technological information that made them stronger and more adaptive. The Picard Gambit. The battle's impossible turning point came when Captain Picard, despite Starfleet orders to remain at the edge of the system, brought the Enterprise into the engagement and began transmitting targeting coordinates directly to the fleet. His previous assimilation by the collective, a traumatic experience that had left him with nightmares and psychological scars, suddenly became humanity's greatest tactical advantage. Through his residual connection to the collective consciousness, Picard could perceive weaknesses in the cube's structure that no sensor scan could detect. He directed the fleet's weapons towards seemingly random points on the cube's hull, locations where critical power conduits ran close to the surface, where shield generators drew power from the main grid, where the geometric perfection of Borg architecture created structural vulnerabilities. The temporal gambit. Even as the cube began to succumb to the concentrated firepower of the entire fleet, the Borg revealed their most impossible tactic yet, a temporal vortex that would allow them to alter Earth's history and prevent humanity from ever developing warp drive. The sphere that emerged from the dying cube's interior launched itself backward through time, targeting the moment when human civilization first reached for the stars. Captain Picard's decision to follow the sphere into the past created a paradox that violated every principle of temporal mechanics that Starfleet understood. The Enterprise crew found themselves fighting a battle across two time periods simultaneously, engaging Borg drones in the 24th century while ensuring that Zephram Cochrane's first warp flight would occur as history demanded in the 21st century. Victory across time. The final confrontation took place not in the vastness of space, but in the corridors of the Enterprise herself, as Borg drones attempted to assimilate the ship and use it to contact their past selves. Data's confrontation with the Borg Queen, an individual who claimed to represent the collective's consciousness while paradoxically existing as a separate entity, epitomized the impossible nature of fighting an enemy that defied logical categorization. Lieutenant Commander Worf's suggestion to destroy the Enterprise rather than allow its assimilation represented the ultimate impossible choice, sacrificing Earth's most advanced starship to prevent the Borg from achieving their temporal objectives. It was Picard's realization that the Borg Queen's individuality was itself a weakness, that her desire to preserve herself was fundamentally incompatible with the collective's supposed perfection, that provided the key to victory. The impossible nature of victory. The Battle of Sector 001 proved impossible not because of the technological disparity between Federation and Borg forces, but because victory required overcoming an enemy that represented the logical endpoint of technological development. The Borg had achieved what every species aspired to: perfect efficiency, perfect adaptation, perfect unity of purpose, yet they had become something that organic life found so abhorrent that death was preferable to joining them. Picard's triumph came not from superior weapons or tactics, but from his understanding that perfection itself was the Borg's greatest weakness. In their quest to eliminate all inefficiency, all individuality, all unpredictability, they had made themselves vulnerable to the very qualities they sought to assimilate. The chaotic, inefficient, gloriously unpredictable nature of human creativity became the weapon that could defeat an enemy that had adapted to every other form of resistance. The battle established the ultimate template for impossible victories in science fiction, the triumph of organic life's beautiful imperfection over synthetic perfection's sterile efficiency, proving that some enemies can only be defeated by the very qualities they consider weaknesses. Conclusion: why impossible battles matter. These 10 engagements, spanning the breadth of science fiction's greatest conflicts, illuminate a fundamental truth about the nature of impossibility in warfare. The most significant victories often come not from superior firepower or perfect tactics, but from the refusal to accept that defeat is inevitable. Each battle represents a moment when the normal rules of military engagement broke down, forcing combatants to transcend conventional thinking and discover new forms of courage, innovation, and determination. The impossible nature of these conflicts stemmed not merely from overwhelming odds, though numerical disadvantage played its role in each engagement, but from the convergence of factors that should have made victory logically inconceivable. Environmental hazards that threatened both sides equally, technological disparities so vast they seemed insurmountable, enemy forces that operated beyond normal understanding of warfare, and strategic positions so hopeless that retreat would have been the only rational option all contributed to creating scenarios where victory required nothing less than the redefinition of what was possible. Yet in each case, victory emerged from the uniquely organic qualities that no amount of technological superiority could replicate or predict: the desperate ingenuity of beings fighting for their survival, the unpredictable innovations born from necessity, the moral courage to make sacrificial choices that transcended rational calculation, and the ability to find unity and purpose in the face of extinction. Whether it was the Rebel Alliance's guerrilla tactics against the Death Star, humanity's viral warfare against technologically superior aliens, or the Enterprise crew's exploitation of Borg perfection's inherent flaws, success came from embracing the beautiful inefficiency of organic thought. These battles matter because they remind us that impossibility is often a failure of imagination rather than a limitation of capability. In the infinite darkness of space, where the battlefield itself can be as deadly as any enemy, the greatest victories belong not to the strongest or most technologically advanced, but to those who refuse to accept that any fight is truly unwinnable. They demonstrate that in the grand theater of cosmic warfare, the most powerful weapon remains the indomitable spirit of beings willing to fight against impossible odds, and occasionally, impossibly, to win.